in this list.
Well, we went through a lot of stuff before the show, and a lot of it we can't publicize out there live because it's too shocking, cutting edge stuff. And here we like to take the we like to drive down Main Street, stop at every light, watch the people walk across the crosswalk, watch the light when it turns red, keep on going, maybe stop at the diner. No, 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 no. We are not exaggeranuses here.
That's right. Right. We're not ignoramuses. We
Yeah.
our favorite animal is the high horse, and we're going to stay on that sucker and ride it till it stumbles. Then we'll find something else.
I did want to I did want to say that well, actually I had left a little clue. I don't know if anybody saw, but I fake titled this episode in the pre-show
Mhm.
side chat thing
Mhm.
as 109 reasons why Greg is wrong about zombie movies.
I thought
um
that I thought we had settled that he is just wrong.
just completely, but um no, because I
Well,
just started watching the first few. Go ahead, go ahead.
no, no, no. You started watching the first few what?
I had seen the Walking Dead series up
Mhm.
to a point, but they have like 100 and something seasons. I enjoyed the first season, and I was into it because it's climactically challenging as they're jumping through hoops trying to escape these creatures. And I like the idea of a group of people in an area that's devastated trying to survive, maybe grabbing the gas, maybe they find a new car, they duck out here. And I like that little adventure travel,
Mhm.
the hero's journey type thing. One season was good, two seasons was good, three seasons I was like, man, four seasons I couldn't, I like the characters just like blended in. I was like, no, I can't, until I dropped off on it.
Mhm.
So to Greg's credit, I get it, but just the same, um there's something to be said about the hero's journey, something
Mhm.
very innate in us. And so there you have
Well,
it.
now let's carry on with this. What is you're more of a horror fan than I am. Okay, I like the old horror movies, but you're more of the modern horror fan than I am.
Yeah,
What was the first zombie movie you remember seeing?
I think it was Return of the Living Dead in the 80s.
Hmm.
And it was the one, it was a George Romero take,
Hmm.
I think knockoff, or he did it, I don't remember exactly. George Romero is Cuban, by the way.
Hmm.
um I have to throw in that, that
Hmm.
um but I didn't know that at the time, by the way. But so it was that one, and I liked it because it was quirky. They had rocket punk rockers in it, and it
Hmm.
was kind of like, and with the gas, they had this green gas that when they snorted it in by mistake out of these drums. You remember that movie? Did you ever see
I
it?
never saw it. I never
And
saw it.
yeah, and then there's a scene in that one. I don't know if I should publicly. What the hell? We're human beings. Where this punk rocker chick with red hair,
Hmm. Uh-oh.
she jumps up on a some sort. They were like in some sort of, I don't know if it was like a cemetery or whatever. But she went birthday suit, and she's just dancing. And I'm a little kid, and I'm watching, and I'm like, yeah, I like that. As a
until
little
she
kid,
until she turned into a monster and ate somebody's
she
brain
did.
or
She
something.
did.
Yeah.
I think she did. So that
Okay.
was the first one I saw. What was the first one you saw?
Night of the Living Dead, George Romero's first movie. Well, I won't say it's his first movie, but it was his first movie that did anything. And extremely low budget. I think it was like $12 and a Kodak Instamatic Super 8 movie camera. Yeah, I exaggerate there. It was higher budget than that, but not by much. But it became a cult classic. And it was played. We had a regular God, now I'm trying to remember if it was Friday night or Saturday night, but we had a regular feature on a local independent station down in the San Francisco Bay Area, Channel 2, that had a show called Creature Feature.
Okay.
And it was after the news. It would come on. They had a host. He would talk about the movies and this, that, and the other. And Night of the Living Dead was a perennial favorite for Halloween nights. And it was almost like a rite of passage that if you were a cool kid, you had to stay up on Halloween after all the festivities and everything else. You had to stay up and watch Night of the Living Dead.
Mm-hmm.
And people would have parties, they'd have sleepovers and what have you, and everybody, all the lights are turned out, and you're watching Night of the Living Dead and just giving it a real good go. And
Good movie.
it was for, especially for what it was. It was very, very cheaply made. There were no big names in it. It was shot 100% on location in farmhouses and out in fields in, I believe, Pennsylvania. I may be wrong there, but it was, in black and white, done as cheaply as possible. You could tell it was done as cheaply as possible, but it was still a good movie. The tension kept you, and it kind of, there's one scene that was a little bit predictable, but that was about it. It kept you going. It kept your attention for the whole.
It was in black and white.
Yeah.
It was a good
Yeah.
movie. It was a good movie. You don't have to have a huge budget necessarily. Well, on the flip side of that, there's something to be said
Mhm.
about excessive use of digital assets in a movie nowadays.
Yeah.
Where it's so overwhelming that in order to fit all that stuff in, which they do to keep people on edge or whatever it is, and I'm not just talking horror, it could be any, action, whatever. It feels like the story suffers due to that.
Right.
In my opinion, I feel that stories
I
are
think you're
getting
right.
crappier, but maybe it's that I'm getting older and I already been around the block. Not in terms of that I know everything, but in terms of that once you see enough scenarios start, middle, and end, you kind of get the gist that things wrap. So I like it when movies give you a nice cliffhanger where you're kind of like, even if it leaves you wanting to know, sometimes that's better than the traditional, start, middle, end, where you've been there, done that a bunch of times, and it's like, I mean,
Well,
you can't kill the protagonist in the first 2 minutes of the movie because
right.
then you have to, okay, everybody, we're done. But
Yes. Well, and the same thing with the villain. The villain has to win every once in a while to keep the story flowing. Because if the villain's killed off in the first 10 minutes, well, that's a wrap, everybody.
Yeah.
Don't forget to visit the lobby on the way out of the theater, buy your popcorn. You can take it to go. That's cool.
Exactly.
That doesn't work. But even then, if the storyline and the plot can carry the flick, then I think then that's okay with me. It doesn't have to be all about the biggest explosion or the greatest CGI.
Right.
It can have a plot, even if it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is a good formula.
Yeah.
There has to be a story there to follow. And it's got to be more than good versus evil. It's got to be more than that. Because we've had thousands of movies that are just good versus evil, and that's it. And that's supposed to carry the entire movie. I don't think so. Not me. And the other thing is, they're basically making movies for the internet population now, the internet generations, with shorter attention spans. So scenes have to cut quick. There can be no static camera shots. There can't be a slow zoom. Scenes have to cut quick. There has to be action to keep people's attention, because if you have two people sitting across the table from one another talking over a situation, you're going to lose folks. They're going to check out of the conversation and just start thinking about their own lives and get on their phones and do stuff like that. So those movies aren't going to perform as well at the box office anymore, and producers and directors know that. So, we're kind of victims of our own success here on the technological front.
You've
But
never
where
watched?
I go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but I will dig my heels into going back to old movies and
Yeah.
then trying to CGI them up and re-release them. I think that's a major mistake, as George Lucas found out with Star Wars.
Yeah, I'm not too keen. I don't know how many more Spider-Mans that. Well, that's from my point of view
Mm-hmm.
because I already been through I don't know how many Spider-Man movies. Even in the 80s, they came out with a TV made for TV Spider-Man, and like the
Mm-hmm.
whole movie had Spider-Man in like 3 shots for like 3 seconds each.
Yeah.
And it was so disappointing. I was like, he climbed up a building, and I was like, yeah, here we go, Spider-Man. And then it's over, and it's like, what the hell? And then people just talking normal. So, but the thing is that there's so many darn Spider-Man renditions, and it's like, okay. What I wanted to ask you was, have you ever seen a Quentin Tarantino movie?
I've I'm sure I have. I couldn't name any. His big ones I've not seen.
All of them are
Um,
his big ones. Are all the ones he's made.
even when he was first starting out.
Yeah, because
Okay.
his first one that he directed himself, because the
Mm-hmm.
one prior was one called True Romance, and it was just his script,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a popular movie. But
Never saw
the,
it.
the the one that he started with was called Reservoir Dogs.
Never saw it. I heard a lot about it, but I never saw it.
Okay, so the reason I well, it depends on your taste, but the reason I mentioned Quentin Tarantino is that throughout the 80s, we grew up on the movies, and you had your Terminators and
Mm-hmm.
sort of like Red Dawn type, and
Mm-hmm.
then you had your werewolf movies with and your Back to the Future. So
Mm-hmm.
we had a lot of iconic movies in the 80s, but something really happened in 1991, 92. I forget the
Mm-hmm.
year it was, where Pulp Fiction came out. And
Mm-hmm.
my friend said, hey, we're going to the movies. And I was always a drag.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to go anywhere. I'm a homeboy. I
Yeah.
feel quite comfortable not interacting, even back then. But back then I was more wild and untamed. So they come on, man. Come on, Eloy, let's go. And I said, dude, the movies, come on. Yeah, dude. And there's the arcade and this and that. Oh, dude. And so we went.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down. The movie started,
Mm-hmm.
and the first thing that popped up on the screen. Remember, everything I had seen up until then was 80s, and then the older movies. Was this intro to the cinema, like from back in the day with scratches?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, is this part of the movie? And then it starts, and then there's John Travolta there, and this and that, and all the scenes were chopped up where I stayed. My friends next to me, I watched that movie with my jaw on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
When it's ended, my friends all got up. Come on, all right, let's go, dude. And I just sat there
Mm-hmm.
staring at the screen, thinking to myself, what I have just seen, is a complete shift in reality. And I'm sitting there, Eloy, come on, let's go, dude. I said, dude, can you believe what we just witnessed? And they were like, they could give a crap. They just saw a movie or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I was completely shocked at what I had seen because number
Yeah.
one,
I was going to ask you why. What got you about it?
number one, all the conversations were things that you did not see in normal, because he has a technique. You'd have to see the technique and stuff, but it was very interactive. But he also chopped up the story where
Mm-hmm.
it all glued together, but he screwed with the timeline so that the first part of the movie was actually somewhere in the middle, and halfway to the end of the movie was at the beginning, and it's sort of stitched itself together as you went. And then by the end of the movie, first time viewing that, you're thinking to yourself, what just happened here?
Okay.
I'm blown away. And I left that movie theater just completely blown away And my friends were like, okay, yeah, whatever. I mean, after the fact, it blew up.
Uh-huh.
Everybody that saw that movie, it blew up. But like I'm saying, amongst my friends, they were like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was a
But
movie. Yeah.
to me, I was like, because it changed the order of how a movie unfolds. And so, anyways, to go to the thing, the hero's journey, um, Quentin Tarantino sort of rearranged the hero's journey so that you get bits and pieces,
Hmm.
and so he makes an interesting. Damn, dude, I scratched myself. Now I got like, it's like a mosquito biting in the. Well, so he I can't stop but see it. Now it's like a nee. So I can't believe I did, because I started picking at it because it itched, and I just kept picking and. Um, so anyway, so yeah, so Quentin Tarantino is good in that he does that to movies.
You just changing around the timeline or playing with the timeline.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do you think he did that with that particular film, or does he do that in most films?
He does a lot of that in most of his films,
Okay.
and it's mind blowing because he's offering you the story in a creative, going back and forth in a
But you have to
creative.
figure it out for yourself. You have to piece it together yourself, right?
I can't put my finger on. There's people that have examined it.
Hmm.
Another thing that he does this, another thing that he does, all the good movies, because what it is that he worked at a VHS rental place
Hmm.
somewhere in California. So he was just like this nerdy movie geek guy that would work at the movie place, and he'd have his fill of all the good movies. And he takes iconic things in American cinema and European, but like in American cinema, and he will, every good artist is a thief, they say.
Hmm.
He will nick from good movies and introduce them into his movies. So like long pan scenes of like
Yeah.
westerns, like some sort of iconic thing, he'll
Hmm.
reincorporate that in his movie, and it just works because the original people, it worked for them.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like a Frankenstein monster in that respect. So yeah, so that was a mind blowing sort of like a thing for me, you know.
Okay.
I would highly suggest you. See, I don't know if you're. It depends because
I know he's very graphic.
he's very graphic, um, and so I guess it's all his movies are very graphic. So it would
Yeah.
have to you'd have to feel bold and to
Yeah.
want to watch one of those
Uh,
movies. I don't know if you.
I've seen clips from a couple of his flicks. I may have even seen. I've seen a couple of clips from Pulp Fiction and Django Unchained and things like that. But
Yeah.
I've never sat down and watched the entire flick. So uh, I'd be lying to you if I said that I followed a plot line or something like that because I haven't sat and watched the entire movie. But yeah, okay, we got to address the elephant in the room, Eloy. We have to because I mean, they're not going to let it go here.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, where's Eloy? That's quite the stash. Near full handlebar. Let's see here. Let's go down the. Come on, there was a couple of more. Holy mustache, Batman. What's going on? I saw your picture earlier on Facebook. I mean, I got to say the mustache was my gig. What's going on?
Nothing. I decided to shave, but
Mm,
I said, you know what? Because these things have been growing out, and so I decided to shave. But then I said, let me shave. Let me leave them and keep
mm,
going. And then when I ended up with this thing, and I
mm.
said to myself, you know what? Screw it. I'm keeping that thing. 'Cause it's such an exaggeration. And I
Uh-huh.
said to myself, you know what? Why not? Let's go ahead and frickin' and do that because it is pretty savage.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I've been sitting here. So I looked at that picture when you posted on Facebook.
It's
I mean, for a
exaggerated.
good 5, 6 minutes, and I'm sitting there going, that reminds me of something, and I can't remember what it is. There's a character, and
I
at
think I
first,
know the
and
guy
at
with the
first,
pistols.
maybe I was. At first I was thinking the Dos Equis commercial. Stay thirsty, my friends. The most interesting man in the world. That's what it. I couldn't remember
Oh
what
yeah.
they called him. At first I was thinking that I'm like, no, that ain't it. That ain't it. There was some that I can't remember. Oh, here we go. Um, put wax on there and twist them. Are you going for a handlebar? Or are you just letting it go for?
I'm not very much into styles.
Uh huh.
I'm winging it. I just
Oh,
said, you know what? Let's leave these things.
like I am. I'm sitting here in a gray pocket tee. Yeah, I'm the height of fashion over here. You know, you could call my style aging hobo, something like that, you know. Uh Yosemite Sam, Snidely Whiplash. I think Eloy's too young to remember Snidely Whiplash.
I don't know who's Snidely
It was a
Whiplash.
cartoon character. Had the handlebar mustache, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're not gonna see a lot of people now. When I used to go to the this is
Hmm.
like a mouthful here because it's not like when I used to go. Whenever my friends dragged me to go to like a club or whatever,
Hmm.
you'd always have your crowds, and I'd be dragged there. It's not like I was quite wanting to be there, but I'd go, and you'd end up having a good time,
Hmm.
you know, in spite of yourself. And I remember going to one hangout thing,
Hmm.
and there was this guy that had the the pristine. It looked like a baseball player from like 1915 or something like that,
Yes.
and he was dressed to the hilt in that style. Kind of like, what do you call it? There's something called. It's kind of like there's a word for it, but like they just get themselves all done up in that style. There's a
In that
name for that.
period costume, the gay 90s kind of a thing,
Yeah, it's not. It's
1890s.
there's a name for it that's used.
Hmm.
It's not preppy. There's another word for it. Not preppy,
Hipsterish.
hipsterish.
Hmm.
So he had this whole hipsterish thing going, and he had that mustache. I was like, and I couldn't help it. I said, "Damn, if my mustache could be like that, of course I'd grow it because it was perfect, dude." I didn't know that you could. I didn't know you could wax it, but he had he looked like somebody that jumped out of the screen from. And I was like, "Holy smoke! Is this guy even for real?"
Mhm,
And we're there with rock and roll shirts, tore up
mhm.
jeans, and this guy's so he really did it up. I'm not trying for that. I just remembered that now.
When I was working at the casino in Nevada, we had one bartender who he had no hair. You know, he had I don't know what the name for it is, but he had the black hair that went all the way around,
Hmm.
but nothing on top. You know,
Yeah,
and he had sideburns down to about the middle of his ear, and then the handlebar mustache, and it was always waxed and oiled. It shined. It would catch the lights behind the bar from across the room. He'd turn
amazing.
his head and it would be like a mirror flashing. That kind of thing. And yes, yes, Jim Dockerow, Raleigh Fingers, the pitcher from the Oakland A's,
Yeah,
back in the 70s. Yes, had the perfect handlebar mustache that
yeah,
curled up and not quite touched the original, as the mustache is leaving. You just
yeah.
not quite touched. And uh, his name was Steve, and be like, damn, Steve, do
Rolly
you,
fingers.
Raleigh Fingers, yeah, do you wax your car as heavily as you wax your mustache? And he's like, nope, don't care what I'm driving, but I look good. And it's like, well, yeah, I can't nobody deny. Tall, kind of muscular, but thin, lean, trim.
Yeah,
And, hey, it worked for him. I could not, but I could not imagine him without that mustache. It would be just a complete, total different person without that stash.
So let me share something slightly. It's not necessarily personal, but I find it because I'm so anti stylishness.
Mhm.
So due to the fact that I mostly have a beard and a mustache for sure, like I always have that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so my aunt, taking note of that, you know, she for Christmas she got me an assortment of like men's like items for beautifying, or I don't even know what the category is.
Beard oil and
And,
mustache
yeah, and so she got
combs
me
and stuff.
this thing. Wait, wait, let me see. There,
Oh,
see that
now,
King
yeah,
Gillette?
okay. Beard balm. There you go. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so here's the thing. So this beard balm smells really good.
Uh-huh.
I have used it, but not for my beard because it's too creamy. I don't want to feel slipping and sliding. I want to feel sand.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I don't like creams on like how you should put creams on your hand to avoid aging. I don't want to feel smooth.
Mhm.
I don't want to feel slippery. I don't like slippery toes. I don't like slippery hands. I want to feel sandpaper. Anyways, but I have used it, and I used it because I ran out of shaving cream, so I lathered it
Mhm.
up and I used it as shaving cream. But it does smell good. It really
Mhm.
does, and
Yeah.
but I don't know that I want a glistening and like sticky, or creamy. You know what I'm saying? I don't know that's something I don't want to sit and feel like I have paint on myself.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
that.
Well,
So
you're also not grooming for a job or something like that.
I also got
So,
this, and this is good
okay.
stuff.
Okay.
This is good stuff. So
And,
that
and
was
what
good.
is that? Is that just a cologne or?
This is cologne. It's Calvin Klein cologne,
Okay.
and it really is good.
Yeah. Okay.
So so
Okay.
yeah. So there's that.
All right. All right. Okay. I
Items from, well, here's another item. I don't know what this, maybe it'll it'll reveal itself.
King Gillette beard thickener. I know a couple people that need that.
Is it
Uh,
beard thickener? It's so tiny I can't read the thing. Let me see what it looks like, just for the heck of it, here live on air.
so you've never
Holy,
even opened that up.
no,
Oh,
I've not.
it's a spritzer bottle. You spray your beard and comb it and tease it and stuff like that. See, I am so behind when it comes to things like this. It's not going to focus. It don't look like. Yeah. Okay.
It's not
See,
focused.
I'm so behind the times on when it comes to things like this. I mean, when I had a beard, it was just wash it when you shower every day and comb it out and you're good. And that was it, you know.
I did once purchase, or actually was gifted to me. Yeah.
Steve, coming soon, Stampled, sponsored by Manscaped.
Um, I did one time was gifted,
Mhm,
what's it called? It's a soap, charcoal soap or
mhm,
something soap.
mhm.
It's a specific soap, and I did use it on my beard
Yeah.
years ago. And
Mhm,
dude, it made the beard
mhm,
freaking like puffed up in a good way. I was like, holy crap, this stuff. I think it was called charcoal soap or
mhm.
something like that. In
I
any
don't
event,
know.
pine tar oil,
Pine tar oil.
pine tar. Can't even say it right. Pine tar soap.
Okay. Okay.
Good
Yeah.
stuff.
My mother asked me one time, she just innocently, she just didn't know. She goes, "Do you use shampoo on your beard or do you use just regular soap?" And at the time, I hadn't really considered it. I just always used regular soap. And I told her that, but yeah, I just use regular soap. I mean, washcloth, wash your face, and just go ahead and go for it with the regular soap. And one day I thought, well, maybe she's onto something here. Maybe I should try some shampoo. I hadn't considered it. So I've always used a shampoo and conditioner, just whatever. And because having longer hair, it'll tangle up on you if you don't.
Yeah.
So I tried it. And I felt like I had a cotton ball hanging off of my chin. It just, like that, like I walk around with a hedgehog. It's like, yeah, no, I don't like this at all. So,
Yeah.
and then just like, no way, not anymore. So after that, I went back to the regular soap, and and the mustache gets just regular soap. I tease about mustache care products and they're deductible and everything, but it's just, it gets washed when I wash my face, and that's it.
There was a time when like beards and such, I've always, ever since I worked in the Everglades, when I was working in the Everglades, I started like at 26 or 27 years old, maybe earlier. I don't, at this point I don't remember. I could have been 24, 25. I don't know. I realized I'm out in the woods. I'm just gonna let my facial hair grow. I'm out in the woods. I mean, I'd always had every now and then a mustache, but this time I said, you know what? Let's go bold. Because remember, I'm here in Sweetwater. That's out in the woods. That's a different.
Yeah.
But I was out there so much, so I just let it, and it kept growing and growing, and then all of a sudden I had a beard like up to my freaking chest here.
Yeah.
And it was freaking awesome. It was, and people would avoid, like in the city, like when you come back to town and you're all
Grizzly Adams.
People, they move out of your way.
Mm-hmm.
All sorts of stuff, because they're like, well, let's just not bother this guy. So I saw that and stuff, and I was like, oh, this is fun. So I kept it, and I've always had it on and off since then. So yeah.
Well, I started growing mustache and beard as soon as I could. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but my dad told me, you want to grow a beard and a mustache, shave, because that stimulates the hair follicles to replace what's been cut off. And so I did. I started shaving, pretty young, and grew beard and mustache and everything else. Mainly because when I was clean shaven, I got carded for everything. I would constantly, people, can I see your ID? 3, 4, 5 times a night in the same place. And that went on until I was 25 years old. But I went into the military, I had to be clean shaven, except for a mustache. You could have a mustache, but there were strict regulations on how big the mustache could be and all this other good stuff. And beards were forbidden because it wouldn't allow you to get a good seal on your gas mask. The hair got in the way, and whatever chemical would get into the gas mask, and, off you'd go, assume room temperature. So when I got out of the military, the first thing I did was, as Linda likes to say, this strange the deformity came over my hands. I couldn't hold a razor anymore. I could hold a fork just fine. Spoon, knife, fork, great. But she'd try to hand me the razor, just fall out. And I didn't shave or get a haircut for 18 months. And I looked like a serious ragamuffin, and then finally cleaned up my act. And the mustache has been there ever since. One time since Linda and I have been married, I was trimming my mustache up to try to make it look a little nicer. And it's one of those cases of, okay, got it trimmed, and this side's over here and this side's over there. No, I got to trim it up a little bit. That's uneven. Let's trim it a little bit here. Now it's uneven. And I kept going, and pretty soon it's like, yeah, no, that mustache is never a good thing. So I just shaved it off.
So you've done the
yeah.
Adolf.
Well, for about 13 seconds, and it's like, yeah, the last time we saw a mustache like that, it did not go well. Let me just go ahead and start over. And so I shaved it off. Linda came home from work, and she got mad at me. I don't mean she was upset. I don't mean she was disappointed. I mean sat down on the couch, arms folded, looking down, 100% pissed off. And I'm like, what's the matter? She looked up at me. She goes, you don't have a top lip. She went back to her sulk like that. And I'm like, damn. So the mustache came back and I quit tried to trim it, haven't trimmed it since. I
There's a
just
bunch of
let it go.
videos. There's a few videos out there, but there's one that I saw where the father, it's the living room, and they put the camera on the corner extreme of the living room,
Mm-hmm.
and the father had shaved his beard and his mustache, and he was sitting on the couch,
Mm-hmm.
and the son comes running in. He was playing, and he comes running in, and the father says, "Hey, champ." And the kid's running in happy, and he turns over happy because he's hearing his voice. And when he turns and sees him, he stop. You can see like the reality.
Who the hell's that?
He stops and he's looking, and you can see the kid's like weirded out. And the dad's saying, "Hey, champ," and he's looking at him. He's like, "Champ, my ass! You're not the same guy I knew." And he said, "It's me." And his son sat on the opposite couch, like he sat down, like taking a moment to get his balance.
Yeah.
Hilarious as hell.
Linda says he looked like he was about 13 talking to me. I'm
Hmm.
older than he is, but not by that much. Yeah, true. Okay. Steve says, I last shaved my stash when I was 18. Yeah. Yeah. See, Jim Dockerel says you can get 5-in-1 soaps for men now. Soap, shampoo, fuel additive, parts cleaner. I don't know what all it does. I think it's also starting fluid, but I may be wrong, Jim. But yeah, I've seen those. They call it body wash.
Hmm.
So, which tells me that even they don't know what all it does, you know,
Yeah.
because that's kind of all encompassing. So I
I
don't know.
mean, without left to look, in a general sense, there's always a gradient of personalities when it comes to men.
Mhm.
But left to our own devices, um, I think that we'd be very easily cavemen coming down just to hunt, and then come back to the cave where the campfire is.
Mhm.
I think so I think women bring um, the aspects of culture and society that is actually quite. I mean, we're not animals. I mean, we do have some sort of thing working up, and so I think that there is a balance there.
I think you're absolutely right. Men will not admit it, but about 99% of what we do for women. You know, um, most men don't give a damn about a car, but they know women like nice cars, so we'll try to get and keep a nice car.
Right.
Men don't care about a house. If men could live in a cardboard box, we would. We don't care about a house, but we know women like nice houses, so we try to keep a decent house. A guy would walk around looking like me, no haircut, no shave, just shaggy. And Jim Dockrell's talking about it's the middle of winter right now. He's in full bushman mode, shaggy hair, beard, and stash. Yeah, most guys are that way. And most guys would be that way all their lives, except we know women don't like that. So I think you're right. I think women bring a certain level of class and culture to men, whether we want to admit it or not.
Yeah, I think that that's very true.
Mhm.
Um,
My
and
current.
and I could give you my specific, like, there's a lot of things that I would do
Mhm.
um prior that now I don't do because I find it useless currently. Um, but it's better to have some boundaries that are informed by the prettier of
Mhm.
the genders, if that could be said nowadays.
Well, most men don't want to look like a slob, but they're willing to basically let themselves go a lot more than if they were out to try to impress a lady.
You'd probably be surprised.
Oh yeah, they'd let themselves go a lot more. I mean, you know, Greg says, took his wife a half day to notice he shaved off his beard last time. Yeah, that's kind of, I don't know what I think about that. I mean, Linda noticed no mustache immediately. So, Steve says it would take my wife longer than that. She doesn't see me that often. Well, you know, you're a special case, Steve. You kind of hide yourself away in that office, but you have to. So,
It's pretty freaking nuts. I'll tell you what.
Jim says, my wife hates my beard. I only wear it in winter. So, okay, now I'm not trying to start a fight here. Okay. All right. Wait a minute. So for 6 months out of the year, she's unhappy with me, as opposed to the other 6 months where she's only disappointed. Okay. Now, I'm not trying to start a fight here, Jim. But I've heard that women shaving kind of goes on vacation in the cold winter times up there too. Is that the case? I don't know. So I was going to say, if they're not going to be Olympic swimmer smooth all year long, do we really have to?
Uh, uh, I could. There's
Yeah, I
things that I
know.
can't say publicly, but
Yeah,
it's
there's things I can't say publicly either, but I know women. I know women who say, "Look, I'm in long pants with knee-high socks, wearing furry boots. Ain't nobody gonna see if I've shaved my legs or not." And I'm like, "Well, okay, yeah, I guess that's true."
oh, I,
He says, "I think it disappears with age." Okay, well, I didn't want to go there, but yeah. And Greg says, when I worked outside, I grew a beard every winter. Yeah. I shaved off the beard because, as you can tell by the stubble I have now, and I do need to shave. I know I do, but it turns whiter and whiter and whiter. And by the time I hit 45, I look like my own grandfather. I think I've shown you a picture
do
where I've got
you do
yellow
you
hair and snow white beard. And it was just like, no.
do you resemble? Well, you just said, but do you resemble the men in your family
Um,
or the women in your family, or a little bit of both?
A
Or
little bit of both. I mean, if I look at myself now, I see a lot of my father in me, but when I was younger, maybe I saw a little bit more of my mother in me. But I never saw my father never tried to grow a beard or a mustache because my mother didn't like it. And it was a shame because my father had black hair, and he was one of those guys who had the perpetual 5 o'clock shadow. He could shave and he still looked like he needed to shave because it was so black,
right?
you know.
Yeah.
And he was in the Navy and went through, boot camp with the Marine drill instructor. And I mean, basically, they were on him to shave 4 or 5 times a day. And it was just, there was nothing he could do.
Yeah.
But he never grew a beard or mustache because my mother didn't like him. So I've not seen none of my grandparents, great grandparents had a beard or a mustache at all. I'm the first guy to break that mold in
But do
my
you
family.
see? But you do see. If you were placed next to like the two or three of your
Mhm.
direct male lines, would people say, "Oh yeah," or do you feel that it's there's a difference or not a difference?
Oh yeah, you can definitely. If you were to you put me in a picture with my mom and dad, you can say, "Oh yeah, he's their kid for sure,
Yeah,
for certain." I mean, there's no there's no doubt about it.
there's no mystery there.
No,
Well,
absolutely none.
I'm just saying because uh when I look at my dad, I mean, we're not the same people, obviously, but
Hmm.
the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as they say. And I
Hmm.
look at my grandfather and I look at my great grandfather. You've seen pictures of them
Sure.
in the past. To me, but this is from my view,
Hmm.
I see there's differences, but I see very little differences when I look at my father when he was older.
Hmm.
I could see my grandfather. And my grandfather, I could see my great grandfather, like the face, the eye sockets, everything. I could see them. Like it's an obvious, chain of events going on there. So likewise, I would say, but when I look at these old photos, all the men from my paternal line, even if they're cousins and whatnot, have a certain look that I look at them and like, yeah, this person is absolutely family. Yes, I can, the same entryways in the head, different slight differences because we're not carbon copies necessarily.
No.
But you're like, holy smokes, it's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen pictures of you with your mom and dad, and you're definitely. I mean, you have a little bit wider of a skeletal structure than your dad, and you got that from your mom on the face. You have a little bit wider of a skeletal structure, but if you were to take his face and kind of, it's there.
Yeah,
it's definitely there.
I think so. I think so. But especially looking at my grandfather and my great grandfather, like you could see it's unfortunate I don't have even further back pictures because pictures didn't necessarily exist back then. But it would be curious to see. There are paintings. I have a painting of a distant cousin. And when I mean distant, I'm talking about 1700s distance, where you go up my tree, hang a right, go down, and that person was like a cardinal of Colombia. So he was like the third, fourth, fifth, or sixth, like cardinal of Colombia, and he has a painting because those people would do paintings in that era. And you look at him. I'll find it later on and share it with you. I can't do it now because I don't have the connection available on my USB. But you look at him. I look at him. And I'm like, yeah, that's us. You could see that in the picture. So
you may not be a carbon copy of those people, but there are certain traits that you can look at and the eyes, the nose. Oh, there's something in my family, and it comes from my mother's side, that when we if we're exercising a lot or we exert ourselves, we get a bright red thing right here in the center of our forehead.
Oh, like I just
and
did?
it goes from about right here on up, and then it just kind of blossoms out like somebody's blowing up a red balloon on the forehead. And that comes from my mom's side. None of my dad's side does that, but my mom did it, my grandmother did it, her mom did it, and my brother does it. I still to this day don't know what the heck that is.
This year, my mom had the same thing on the same cheek.
You mean like that? Maybe we are cousins.
Well, we are cousins sometime in the past at some point.
Oh, yeah. Just depends on how far back you want to go.
But that location, just like that, my mom.
Yeah, I've seen her picture.
Right there.
Yeah.
Which is an incredible thing. So, yeah, we're an amalgamation of these.
How we got on this, I don't know. I just was bringing up your mustache. But, yeah, it is. The family resemblance is strong. But, it's funny. I've got a photo. You're talking about having photos and wishing you had pictures. I have a picture of my great-grandfather when he was a kid. It was one of the first school class pictures taken in this area. And it's him and two of his sisters when he was in grade school. And I don't have another picture of him until he was well into his late 60s, just before he died. But I have no photos of him in between those two. It's kind of weird. And then I have one picture of my great grandfather, and then that's it. I don't have any photos of anybody.
That's such a good thing that's such a great thing to have. It's unfortunate that I've tried to hunt down as much as, and I've done a lot of hunting down and gather. I mean, I've basically rebuilt the tree, but as far as photos past the late 1800s, it's very. I have some photos of people that were born in the mid to early 1800s, because just by sheer or just by sheer their lifespan crossed over into the era of photographs.
Mhm.
But it's a shame. Well, it is what it is. But it would have been cool
Mhm.
if there were paintings of each relative. But you know how expensive that would have been.
Oh
So
yeah, and that was a rich person's game.
yeah,
That was really a rich person's game. Uh, what can you say? Greg
yeah,
says. Greg says Eli looks like the Pope that just died.
yeah. Greg sent me a photo of the Pope when he was younger at some point, and I looked at the photo and I never really replied or anything. I just looked at it. He said, "You look like this guy." I'm like, okay. I don't. It to me, it just seemed like a random guy. And so later he says, don't you know who that is?" I'm like, "I have no freaking idea." And he says, "Well, aren't you Catholic?" I said, "Well, yeah. I mean, I said, yeah, the world of Catholicism that I fall into, but it's not like I keep up with all the because I fall into that world, right? I
Hmm.
fall into that world by tradition and by heritage,
Hmm.
but it's not like, there are people that are apostates running across the country, jumping on trains and
Yeah.
hitching rides and like so. It's just, but yeah, I fall in the, but
So,
yeah,
so you come from a Catholic family, but you don't have the trading cards. Huh? Yeah,
right.
you don't have the Pope collection cards. Okay.
Hmm. Well, I've mentioned it before, but to me, and I have found as of late redeeming qualities in Catholicism as far as historically speaking, but
Hmm.
as far as the statuettes and stuff, I just there's something strange for me growing up. The little statues, like my grandmother, oh, here's a little statue, and then put little and it's usually a guy with a dog, and the
Hmm.
dog was like all like bent over, and there was blood gushing out everywhere. And oh, here's another statue, and it's like, and then they'd put them on my dresser, and I
Hmm.
go to bed, and like I look over the dresser, and they'd all be standing there staring at
Staring
me,
at you.
and I didn't understand. And it's supposed to be good. Why do I
Uh,
feel like I don't want them looking at me?
that's it.
You understand what I'm saying? It's
I
like,
do. I do.
so I went, and I remember I opened up my drawer, I went, and it was a little moment of epiphany for a kid, but I said, I felt bold because you're not
Hmm.
supposed to mess with them. And I
Hmm.
went over, I opened up the drawer, and I went all inside the drawer and closed the door. And I felt so much better sleeping, dude.
You didn't have all those eyes watching you.
Hell yeah. So to me, so that's something I couldn't jump over that hurdle with like little statuettes and whatnot. Yeah.
I don't know. Let's see. Jim Dockerel says we got a red mark in the middle of our forehead too when we misbehaved, in the shape of my mom's ring. Actually, yeah, my mom never did that. Mom got a wooden spoon, and she'd whack your butt with that. Neither my brother nor I ever considered anything like that even remotely abuse, because, and I will tell you, even then, I knew I deserved whatever spankings I got, because that was not something that was done willy nilly. It wasn't just, okay, who spilled the milk on the rug, spank us both. That didn't happen. You had to do something. And I mean, do something to get a spanking, you know.
Yeah. Well,
But
I mean,
Linda says spatula. No, that was my grandmother that was with the spatula. Grandma was a samurai warrior with a spatula. She got the slotted one that whistled when she swung it. She was, I mean, she was a terror. but
I
but again, you had to do something. It wasn't just, for no reason.
I remember having I don't know what it was about, but I had an argument with like I did something wrong, and my
Mm-hmm.
dad looked at me and says, "Get out of the house."
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I went out of the house, like I respected his decree as if
Mm-hmm.
it were the king making a decree,
Mm-hmm.
and I got out of the house. And then I was like, well, what do I do now? I just started walking around, and I walked around a little bit. My mom, I don't know if she was in the kitchen. She came out and she says, son, what are you doing? I said, I can't go back in the house. I was told to get out of the house. And she says, son, come in, just go back to your room. But in my mind, the decree was law.
Oh, Dad said no.
But my dad just did it to solve the problem at the moment, and he went back to
Yeah.
do what he was doing. Like he wanted to put his foot down at the moment, and that was done. But in my mind, I had to wait until the decree was revoked, and I was able to enter the kingdom again. And my mom steps out. I know she's throwing a bucket of water out. I don't know what she's doing. She says, "So, what are you doing?" I said, "No, I'm not allowed back in, and I don't know what to do." I'm walking around, and she's like, "Just come back." And so I went. I went back in, but I went back in like saying, "Oh, I'm
Sneaking.
yeah." And so it's stuff that as a kid, so I did have respect for them continuously, but I guess it's hormones and whatnot. You have to test the waters and push to see how much you can get away with, you know.
All kids do it. All kids do it. I did it to my dad. My kids did it to me. All kids do it. My dad did it to his dad. All kids do it. But you also learned real quick where that line was and what not to push. So, mom and dad never contradicted one another. If my dad said something, no, mom never contradicted him. We never saw it anyway. She might in private, but if dad said do something, dad said do it, go do it. Mom never did anything like that. As they got older, mom became more assertive, and she became the disciplinarian. And there was that threat, oh, wait till your dad gets up or wait till your dad gets home. But as time went on, mom didn't wait no more. She handled it herself. And we knew it. I mean, and I deserved every one of them I got. There were a few times that, my brother did something, he'd lie on me and I got it for something he did. But I figured it all comes around because there were times I lied on him and he got it.
Right.
But all in all, yeah, we deserved it. So, let's see here. Jim Dockrell said one brother-in-law called my mom Spike as a nickname. My mother got a job as a quality control inspector for a company that made aluminum housings for military radios. And she had a reputation there. They called her the Dragon Lady. Now, she was a firm person, but she wasn't mean or vicious or anything like that. But if it was supposed to be a certain way, it was going to be a certain way. And there was no two ways about it. And that's all there is to it. And I mean, it was that way growing up. If mom said clean up your room, you cleaned up your room. And there was no two ways about it. And if she come in and saw the room was still a mess and you're sitting there playing with a race car or something like that, I told you to clean your room. All right. Pick up your dirty clothes, put them in the hamper and, make your bed and do this, that, and the other. I'm done, Mom. She'd come in, look around. All right, go outside. I don't want to see you no more.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well, I remember weird things. You had something to say. Go ahead before I.
No, go ahead because I was going to almost, but not quite change the subject. But go ahead.
So just as a little side thing within that, just thinking of and we've mentioned this before slightly, in little bits here, being a first generation American, where you're growing up American, but your parents, and American, we're referring to be clear, they were Americans since they were born because we're talking America, but we're talking America, the United
North
States.
America, yeah. Okay.
But just to give that little tidbit there. But being first generation, there were traditions that you probably participated in,
Participated in, yeah.
you could say partook in, right?
Sure.
It just partook in. I'm so partooken after that, all that
Now, are you
excitement.
saying partook in?
Partook in,
Yeah, 2 words. Yes.
yeah. Um, so there was things that weren't typical in Cuba,
Hmm.
things like the tooth fairy,
Okay.
things like instead of Christmas, there was the three wise men. So instead of, although Santa Claus was known,
Hmm.
you would get gifts from the three wise men.
Okay, so there wasn't the Santa Claus as we know now.
Right. The Santa Claus was known as part of the whole seasonal thing, but it wasn't part of the Spanish world.
Okay.
It was the three wise men that would bring gifts, and therefore the
Okay.
kids would get gifts and whatnot.
Hmm.
For a time, due to the fact that my aunts and uncles and all those people that were Cuban exiles, they were keeping alive what they knew,
Hmm.
which is the traditions of Cuba by
Hmm.
way of Spain. So not only did I enjoy the Christmas Santa Claus,
Hmm.
but then after the fact, they said, "Oh, look, this is what your aunt brought you, and look at this." And I said, "Well, what's this all about?" I said, "Oh no, because we celebrate the three wise men as well." And I was like, "Oh, the three wise men," and so
Great.
so I'm acquiring a double scenario, but that only lasted for so long because then everybody started getting wise to the
Yeah.
sticker.
Okay. Well, we don't do the wise men anymore. It's just Christmas, and that's it.
Right,
Santa
and
Claus.
and and another one was um, the Tooth Fairy.
Uh-huh.
And I remember saying to my dad, "Oh, my tooth, Dad, my tooth is about to come off. So if I put it, the tooth fairy is going to come." And he said, "No, no, no, we don't do the tooth fairy here." And it's like, so it's a transitional thing with
Mhm.
cultures where things are being brought over, and the children being born here are in this particular case, because I'm literally,
You were kind of stuck in the middle.
right. I was conceived in an era with people that transitioned over. Um, so I got a little bit of all that stuff, but it only lasted so long.
Hmm.
Because I was born in the mid-'70s. They had been around since the early '60s, so it
Hmm.
took it lasted quite a while. But by the time I come around, it lasted for a few years, and then you're done with the three wise men and so on and so. And the tooth fairy was nowhere to be found. Like,
Hmm.
I'd see the tooth fairy on Sesame Street, and I go to my dad, and he's like, "No, no, no, that's not. We don't do that." And so, you know,
What about the Easter Bunny?
we did do that.
You did do
But
the Easter Bunny? Okay.
we did do that, but I don't know if that was from coming from Cuba, or if it was just simply adopted here. I don't know, because we adopted, or my parents adopted early on,
Mhm.
everything. Thanksgiving was always
Mhm.
Thanksgiving, and it was funny enough, at some for Cuban exile families, you either have the turkey, which is the primary thing, or some families will have a ham. But I
Mhm.
think that that's normal for everybody.
Yeah, I know families out here that do one or the other.
Yeah,
Some of them will do a small version of both. They'll get a small turkey and a small ham,
yeah.
so that there's a choice there. But we have always associated Linda and I a turkey with Thanksgiving, a ham with Christmas, and a ham with Easter. Easter, she does a big deal for us for Easter. We don't go to nobody else's house. And I mean, this woman cooks like she's cooking for a family of 10 for Christmas every Easter. And I mean, she'll start cooking 2 days in advance, doing desserts and things like that. She puts on a big, huge thing, and it's just her and I. And it's just one of those things that she likes to do. Of course, me being the greedy, thankful husband that I am, I gladly accept everything that she does
Of
because she's a
course.
damn good cook. But I kept trying to tell her, "Look, you don't have to do this. You don't have to go overboard." She's like, "Did it ever occur to you that I like it?" Okay.
And it's wonderful
Okay.
memories.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just one of those things. She says, "I never could get the hang of cooking for two." Well, she does have some history with that because her first husband was a fire captain with the U.S. Forest Service, and the better part of their marriage was spent with them living at a ranger station, and she cooked for all the fire crews. So it was common for her to cook for 20, 25 people. So, when you get used to that, yeah, okay. All right. So I said 20, 25, 12 to 15. Well, I guess it depends on the season. So it's so yeah, trying to scale all that stuff down, because when your recipes all start with take a gallon of whatever, you're like, oh no, that's going to be way too much for us.
Yeah. Jim said,
We're up here. Which one?
he says, my mom came to Canada in 1945 at 18 years old. The entirety of her teen years were in wartime England.
So that's why she scared the hell out of your brothers-in-law. Um, yeah, I would imagine that would instill a certain amount of toughness.
I saw a picture the other day on Facebook where we all get mostly our education these
Oh,
days.
of course,
That's
yeah.
tongue in cheek,
Mm-hmm.
but it is educational. A lot of people come down on Facebook, and yes, there's a lot to come, but there's a lot of the exchange of ideas is always good, even when there's bullcrap going on behind the scenes. But there was a photograph from the wartime era England
Mm-hmm.
and what they had done. And I don't know if this was World War One or two. It was probably World War Two. I don't know exactly, but it was London.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to avoid bombings in London, they lifted up with zeppelins nets
Mm-hmm.
so that the other zeppelins or something or the biplanes, or I don't know what the story, couldn't lift up high enough or something like that. That was the suggestion when people were writing about it. It was like a huge net going up into the sky, and that was the answer to it. And it sounds like a correct answer. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
look into it further, but I didn't know about that.
Believe it or not, that is still used in some areas today. Um, Launching balloons with long wires on them, because they will foul, especially in rotary wing aircraft, helicopters. Uh, they can, you can take a couple of balloons with wires hanging off the bottoms tied to other long wires and just lift a bunch of obstacles up in the air
And
that
if it
will
gets
foul
tangled,
an aircraft, that can screw them up. You
yeah,
can cause an aircraft to crash.
yeah,
And that's still done today in some places. It's
I
kind of
found it
a
interesting.
low tech way. It just makes the aircraft avoid you, basically, because they don't want to take the chance of flying into something that they can't see. You know. So
Steve said he always did both holidays. I don't know which both
um,
he's talking about.
they always did both for all the holidays. I think he's talking about a ham and a turkey.
Oh, gotcha.
So yeah, and Greg hides his own Easter eggs. Well,
Keep
so
them,
long
keep them where you found them.
so long as you find them all, you're still good.
Just for that joke,
Mhm.
he is now being punished with homework. You are to watch seasons 17 and seasons 56 all the way through back to back of Zombies and the Conga Line, uh, created in 1973 with overdubs in French.
Yeah, there you go. Korean subtitles. Yeah, Steve, correct. He said both turkey and ham for all holidays. Yeah. Okay. We traditionally do turkey on Thanksgiving, but it could go either direction for Christmas. Usually ham though. So, yeah.
Yeah, but nothing.
Um,
The Go ahead.
no, no, no.
No, 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 no.
I was trying to fill in because Jim says that at 16, when the air raid sirens went, his mom he's talking about, she was in an ambulance picking up the injured, wounded, and worse. Yeah, that'll make you grow up quick. I can't imagine living like that in wartime, under siege constantly. You know, have you watched any of the documentaries of the London Blitz?
In the past, I have. I haven't seen it recently, but people were in the underground.
Mhm.
People were trying to just wait it out.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've seen. I have not sat through it recently, but I have watched various documentaries on it in the
Yeah,
past. So I have the memory of it from that.
yeah. You had have people that would come out of those tunnels after the all clear was given and come up and look and find that their house was gone. They just go back down and just stay there. I mean, basically becoming cave dwellers until the war was over because you didn't dare try to rebuild anything. Not when you had bombers coming over every night. So,
Yeah. Um, yeah. It had to be. I so World War II had to be. I mean, it's inconceivable for us from our point of view, because if something like that happened now, um, the temptation to use even deadlier,
oh,
um, that is a scary thought to have.
we would be so screwed just simply because people wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
They would have no clue. The population at large, a certain percentage would, but the population at large would have no clue what to do.
Um, so during that era, well, Cuba was independent on its own, but Spain, um,
Yeah, they were actually our ally.
well, no, they were neutral. They had one
Well,
foot. They had 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
yes, because they did patrol the Gulf of Mexico and the strait between Cuba and Florida. Their navy patrolled that area
Well,
for
no,
Germany.
I'm talking about Spain. Like I
Oh,
mentioned,
okay,
Cuba,
yeah. I was talking
but
about Cuba.
Spain was neutral, although they were the government at the time was cozy with the Germans at the time,
Hmm.
um, which was the Franco
Hmm.
regime,
Yeah,
because and they didn't enter the war because the years prior they had their own civil war,
right.
and they were just coming out of that when
Mhm.
World War II busted out. So
Yeah.
they had been
Hmm.
through the ringer within in country,
Hmm.
and due to that, a lot of Spanish migrated out,
Hmm.
ended up, a lot of them in New England area,
Hmm.
a lot of them just about everywhere, but because they simply you were drafted and you had to. So in World War II, they were kind of neutral, although there was activity, right,
Right.
in Spain. One person that I don't know how he fits in my tree, by my same surname, Escajedo, appears to have been. He was a young guy, and he went and fought in France,
Hmm.
in the north of France, with a group of other. You could say there were communists,
Hmm.
and they were blowing up railways and so on because France was taken over by the Germans, and
Hmm.
they were there to lend support. And they got caught,
Hmm.
and they got tried by the Germans, and their names were published on the paper. They were due to be executed, and they were executed. Um, and so he comes out in various documents and stuff. I don't know how to place him, but he's got to fit somewhere in there. But he's one of
Yeah.
the people that I can't place. Who knows who the parents were? But in France, in the north of France, there's a village, and in that village, one of the streets is named after him.
Oh, wow.
In that Yeah, and there's a monument with all the people involved in what they were trying to do,
Yeah.
but they got caught, and summarily executed back to back.
So he was fighting with the resistance.
Yeah, yeah,
And the generation during and after World War II um, really revered those people. I mean, put them on a pedestal, and you'll find lots of monuments, lots of mentions, and lots of things named after resistance members. And I don't know how well they're revered these days. When we were there in the 80s, late, geez, now I can't remember if it was 1989 or 1990, we went to France. There was a little bit of mention, but not a lot. And, but I know that they were revered for a couple of generations there. So that doesn't surprise me that there would be something named after somebody, especially somebody who was captured by the Germans, tried and executed.
yeah. There's a
So,
whole like his story is laid out, but they don't mention who his parents were. Like they
right.
mention what he did, what he bombed,
Mm-hmm.
what the jury or whatever
The trial and the sentence and all that other good stuff.
they mention everything, but they don't, and they mention where he was born, which is the same. Well, he has my same. I have his same last name,
Mm-hmm.
and and he was born in the same village that my grandfather, great grandfather, uh,
Mm-hmm.
going back in time, were born. So he would have to be, at some point, he would
Related
be
somehow, yeah.
right. But I
Yeah.
wish I knew,
Mm-hmm.
because that would be a cool thing to connect and also
Oh, yeah.
join into the tree. But you know, it's interesting. I would never have thought these angles until I started poking around and being nosy.
Yeah.
For all
Well,
these historical points and all that.
it's sometimes surprising to go back and look into what your ancestors did with their lives. I mean, most of us think we live, maybe we do live pretty mundane lives. But when you go back and look at how they survived, I mean, okay, my parents never really had any huge hardships to overcome. My grandparents did. They lived through the Great Depression and World War II. My grandfathers, they lived through World War One as well. They were young at the time, but they did. And then their parents, I mean, you don't have to go that far back to you're into pre-electricity. We're in the horse and wagon days
Hmm.
and things of that nature, and
Yeah,
things that we would find to be outrageously difficult that was commonplace for them.
yeah,
We wouldn't even think about traveling. Like, I wouldn't even consider jumping in the car and driving to Miami to visit you without some form of planning, without arranging for a place to stay, every step of the way, you know. Whereas we're talking about people that jumped into a wagon with everything they owned and tried to provision as much as they could to spend 3 to 6 months coming out west from Missouri. And they didn't know where they were going to end up. They didn't know a thing about it because you couldn't research. You went by what you heard through the grapevine, and you hoped like heck people knew what they were talking about.
yeah,
I can't even fathom that. I can't even imagine doing something like that.
yeah.
So,
You're playing a game of risk and
mhm.
chance with your life and the
Well,
life
look
of
at your
everyone.
ancestors that left Spain to go to Cuba. They didn't even know if they were going to make it to Cuba because weather forecasting wasn't a thing. And
No,
how many ships were lost out there at sea from storms and hurricanes and this, that, and the other? So they didn't even know if they were going to get there. I
I
can't
mean,
even imagine that.
I mean, so the so my so they went to Cuba in the late 1800s, so it was turn of the century.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you had situations like the Titanic of years later, But by that time, navigation was I mean, it was long and arduous, but it wasn't. You're talking about late 1800s. You're talking about turn of the century. Um, so it wasn't. Remember, my family didn't go to Cuba 200 years ago.
Well, no, understood. It wasn't prehistoric, but there was no satellite photography. They didn't know if
Yeah,
there was a storm coming up from down south. You were
yeah.
just kind of winging it, you
Well, my
know?
great grandfather, on my mother's side, stowed away on a ship, on a Canadian ship,
Hmm.
full of onions and potatoes and so on. He stowed away.
So he had food.
He stowed away to get from the Canary Islands to Cuba.
Hmm.
Um, so he did that. That was pretty crazy. And my great grandmother, his wife.
Hmm.
Wait, how is it? No, his mother-in-law. His
Hmm.
mother-in-law sailed with her kids without the father
Uh-huh.
to Cuba from the Canary Islands. And according to my grandmother, because she would write diaries and stuff, she spent the trip just vomiting because it was like
Yeah.
rocking and it was
Yeah.
like it was nonstop. So stuff like that.
Hmm.
Uh, but you know, either way, imagine the first people
Hmm.
or early people trekking across the ocean with no, because I mean, by the time 200 years or 300 years go by
Hmm.
and people are sailing, it's dangerous, it's uncomfortable, but it's no longer like there's nothing out there. Maybe there is, maybe there's not. Now they know that if you go in this direction, there's a place like
Yes.
Cuba and this and that. But imagine those people that didn't know and they were heading out into the sunset, kind of like what you're saying with the wagons, but like just going back like to the 1600s
Hmm.
or 1500s. Um, that's basically like going to the moon and not expecting to, you don't know if you're gonna
Yeah.
make it back. The world ends.
But you don't even know if you're going to make it there. Yeah. No, you don't know if you're going to make it back, but you don't even know if you're going to make it there.
And you don't even know where there is because
Hmm.
there's never been a there. I mean, they did expect to reach like Asia.
Sure.
So they did expect, or that was the theory.
Hmm.
They did expect that, but
Hmm.
they had never gone that route. So they were figuring maybe we just get lost and there's nothing out there.
Hmm.
In their minds, this is we're playing on a theory from this guy.
Yeah.
Are we going to survive this?
Hmm.
That's like insanity, dude.
Yeah. I
Once
mean,
they
would you
found
would
land,
would you stow away on a ship, hiding in a bunch of potatoes and onions, hoping that you didn't get caught? And how
dude,
many weeks did it take to get there? I
that's a good
mean,
question.
you know,
You're crossing the Atlantic. Who
yeah.
knows how long?
Or is it a case of let me just hide until we're so many miles offshore and it's too far for them to turn around and take my butt back? You know, maybe I
Yeah.
can work off my passage, once we're out at sea and it's too late to go back.
What I don't know about the story, and now there's not many people or nobody to actually find out about, is so according to my aunt and grandmother when she was alive,
Hmm.
he was fascinated with Canada.
Yeah.
There was something about Canada for him.
Hmm.
We don't know why that is, but and he ended up jumping on a Canadian ship. It just so happened that it ended up in Cuba. But he was totally, according to, he had some sort of fascination with Canada. So there you
Maybe
have it. Who knows what the story is with that.
maybe he heard they had Slurpees. I mean, you never know. You never know. Well, my whole point of bringing this whole thing up is you don't have to go that far back to find these people who had what we would consider to be very, very adventurous lives.
Yeah.
And, but some of the things, I mean, we think it's inconvenient when we don't get a cellular connection.
Oh yeah.
Well, these people didn't even have electricity, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you're reading by the light of a candle, if you can read, when you're doing everything indoors by the light of one, maybe two candles, and if you couldn't afford glasses and your eyesight went when you were 35 or 40 years old, that was just it. Just too damn bad.
Yeah, at that point, maybe they had magnifying glasses and I think 1700s was spectacles, right? That they
Oh
had.
yeah, there were eyeglasses available, but they weren't cheap, and most folks were subsistence level farmers. If you had money and you could afford to buy glasses, yeah, I mean, then you're fine.
Or you could write the letters. Well, if you were writing, you could write
Hmm.
the letters like super big
Hmm.
to sort of get it.
Yeah.
Let me
Well,
address what Jim is saying. If you can
okay.
bring
Which
up
one?
the well
What?
the old proverbial Vikings versus
Okay.
Columbus
Well,
bit.
just so you know, you can select those too if you want to highlight somebody's. But go ahead. Okay. Go ahead.
So he says the first white people to the Americas were the Vikings. Um, so you know the Vikings. They say what was his name?
Leif Erikson
Leif
in
Erikson.
yeah, up in I get a mistake, and I don't know if it was Newfoundland or New Brunswick, but it was one of those two now provinces
But
where they
up
landed.
there that
Yeah.
um and so I think that they also celebrate it as well up there, like it's a big thing.
Hmm.
There is something. There's so nobody knows until the Columbus expedition that it even mattered. It wasn't until after Columbus that the
Newfoundland. Okay.
the other it wasn't until after Columbus
Hmm.
that anybody in Europe gave a
Hmm.
sniff
Yeah.
about the products and availability of resources here.
Yeah.
It's not written anywhere in history. It's not mentioned anywhere in history.
Yep.
It's not known about across correspondence throughout the powers of the age in Europe.
Yep. And that's what I
It's
was going to mention.
the repercussions of the expeditions of the Vikings.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know all the details involved, but they didn't affect the history
No.
of
And
humanity from the vantage point of European
right.
exploration by any stretch of the imagination. But
Because Erickson didn't tell anybody.
well,
He didn't say anything. He didn't tell everybody. Columbus went back and he told everybody.
when Columbus, so the power that was rising in Europe was Spain.
Hmm.
There was no Spain per se. It was kind of like what England or the British Isles were. It was just little
Kingdoms,
uh,
city state kingdoms. Yeah.
city state kingdoms, and there was not necessarily, it was a process of unification. But by the time 1492 came around, it just so happened that the last of the Iberian Peninsula was conquered by the Spanish queen
Yeah.
and king, the Catholic kings. And so Columbus did go to
Hmm.
other countries and he was rejected with his idea. And it was the Catholic kings of Spain, of the newly now unified peninsula, that funded the voyage. And it was because of that event that
Hmm.
Spain, in part, largely, that Spain rose to power. At the time, England was not,
Hmm.
or the British Isles was nothing to do as far as power or
No,
seaworthiness,
they were still building up. Yeah.
even seaworthiness as far as
Hmm.
ships, products. They would gather wool
Hmm.
and they would sell it to other countries in the Low Countries in order for them to
Yeah.
process it. They were very much not. But then the age of piracy started to go underway, and things unraveled. And then England eventually took over. But the point is this: the Vikings. I think that I don't know how much the proof or not proof or this or that, but I'm sure that there's established things that
Oh
can be
yeah.
verified.
Oh yeah.
Um,
They have been. It's like Jim is saying. They have found 11th century Viking settlements
yeah,
there in Newfoundland. But again, the thing is, They never told anybody about it. They never said anything. They got there and basically decided, okay, yeah, fine, great, and then they went back. There was no, what they considered, there was no civilization there to plunder. There was the British Isles. There were people there to raid, and there were people to capture as slaves. There were things to be had. There was something to ransack. They didn't find anything like that in North America, so they just decided, yeah, okay, fine, there's some land there, but oh well, no big deal. And they didn't tell anybody about it. The difference was Columbus had something to prove to Ferdinand and Isabella, and he told everybody. And that's when the rush was on to the New World.
The Vikings also didn't have, it became a thing eventually.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have Christianity.
No,
And the
they
reason
didn't.
that that's important is that, well, it's religion. They had their
Mm-hmm.
own religion. They didn't have Christianity. They weren't part of that broader European, come
Conquer
by
and
way
convert. Yeah.
what had come by way of Rome,
Mm-hmm.
which was introduced, through Rome when Rome accepted it, and the rest of Europe. So it's true, as far as I understand it, that the Vikings were there, and you could say, well, they were there first, but it wasn't a known thing. But there were people here already
Mm-hmm.
before that, so there were native
Yep.
people here even before that. But I did want to go through that thing because, um, as far as Europe is concerned, if we don't have to give credit necessarily to Columbus, and we can defer it, to someone else. But I don't think it's correct when you weigh it in the balance, the effects
Sure.
of the one or the other,
Yeah.
and so it's like, you know,
Yeah, and that's one of the funny things that I like to think about when I hear some folks over in Europe say, "Well, America, they're too young to have a culture," and all I can think of is, "Oh, really?" So my great 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 grandmother's Lakota nation, that doesn't count for anything. Greg's ancestors, who were here for centuries before the first Europeans, that doesn't count as culture. I mean, that doesn't count for something. I mean, you know, Greg's ancestors and my ancestors could look at both Leif Erikson and Columbus and say, you're all newbies because we was here before y'all were, you know?
yeah. Well, it's
So,
not all hail. So Greg says, all hail Columbus, all hail Spain. Well, it's
mhm,
so look. So it's not all. It's not necessarily all hail Columbus, all hail, but it is, at least look at it in, at least for me,
mhm,
it's look at it in its truest light. So I could say, I could lie about it,
mhm.
but I think that it's accurate to say that Columbus is a big deal when it comes to, the
The
Americas
impact. Yeah.
and the impact in Europe. I think there's no way around it. And as far as, Spain, I think that, according to what I've studied, it's a big subject, because the assumption is that the powers that be, which was England and Spain, let's say, there were others, obviously the
France,
Portuguese,
Portugal,
but let's
Netherlands.
but let's put the hand on like the little chess pieces, put the hand on the table and go like that with all that,
Like you did with your icons into the drawer.
like I did with my icons into the door for half a moment, and to say the truth of the matter. Yes, there was France, there was this, there was that. Yes, yes, and the Dutch,
Hmm.
absolutely. But if you look at the map of the Americas
Hmm.
and the possessions taken,
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
you have Spain and you have England,
They had the manpower, they had the ability, and they had the will.
but there were two different groups of people with two different types of religion,
Hmm.
and they had two different ways of dealing
Hmm.
with the people that they encountered.
Oh, big time.
You know, so so to be fair, everybody was taking and doing not so nice things
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
would consider today. But there were variations, and if one looked into that, that's a whole different story. But yeah, so yeah, the Vikings. I mean, and by the way, we all share the same history, no matter where in Europe. Even though you may identify, let's say, as an ancestor directly to the British or to the English specifically, like Jim Dockrell, and there's people that have a little known history, maybe 1 foot in the Americas and 1 foot in Europe and this and that. Maybe some people are in the South, and like myself, I connect with people from Southern Europe and stuff, so, and the Canary Islands, as well, which is off the coast of Africa. But even though all these people, that's all our history anyhow. So the Vikings, when I hear, with my understanding now, I hear the only exception is when I see people that identify with it and don't have the not you guys, and not, but I'm saying out at large, when people don't realize how it's all spider's web. Those Vikings raided the rest of Europe, and mothers and children and sons and fathers are all mixed together. Even in southern, just even into Russia, down south into Italy, all that is like a big. So there are all our ancestors, but so like I couldn't say, oh yeah, the Vikings, screw the Vikings. No, the Vikings were part of our history in a broad sense. I'm just saying that, isn't it fair to say no? The Columbus impact was the impact.
Yeah,
the major
sure.
impact. People don't like to hear that. I'm not saying that necessarily like Dockrell and
it's
and,
not
and
it's not a good or bad thing. It just is. It's a fact. That's all. The truth has no agenda. Jim Dockrell were not the Dutch. Were the Dutch not a major power around that time too? They were getting there. The Dutch became huge especially in the Indian Ocean, because they became okay. The Arabs used to buy spices from India and then sell it to the world, basically, European travelers and Asia and everything else. But then they stopped selling to Europe. And that was when the Portuguese kind of went down south around Africa and started establishing various colonies, worked their way across the African continent, and then started setting up ports on the East Coast and basically took over the spice trade, found another way to India, first going around the Cape and everything. Well, then the Dutch did the same thing and virtually stole the spice trade from the Portuguese because they had other fish to fry. So, I mean, the Dutch were a major power there too.
Another side note on the Dutch: Spain controlled the Dutch for X amount of years, hundreds of years.
Yes.
And the Dutch were not happy about that. But they were under their control. People from Spain set up shop in the lowlands, low country, and they set up, business. The English, the Americas, money coming in, items coming in. The English and the Dutch allied, and there was pressure put, and war was waged against the Spanish to rid themselves of the Spanish. And there was a religious issue too, where Catholicism was against Protestantism. And so those were the lines drawn. But the Dutch resented the Spanish, and to this day, when people are born with black hair in the Low Countries, there's a saying that, oh, that was because of the raping and pillaging of the Spanish.
Oh, geez.
To this day. And well, no, another one is the one that you guys had mentioned a couple of years back that I remembered and I looked up, was the Black Irish. Well, during the Spanish Armada situation was the turning point. That was the point where England started to take off big time. Those people that were taken in, and that were Spanish sailors and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the saying is that they just basically were hidden and blended in with the local population, and all of a sudden, black-haired, dark-eyed Irish people were starting to pop up everywhere, and this and that. And well, here's the thing: they did do a because of these legends and people being
Mm-hmm.
picking at it. They did do a study. They've done various studies,
Mm-hmm.
and you can find it online. I mean, there's so, and it's interesting on besides, but they did a study, um, and the people they call Black Irish,
Mm-hmm.
and likewise the Dutch thing. They did a study on the Dutch thing, which can be
Mm-hmm.
found. They have the papers online for free. The people that have dark hair in the Low Countries,
Yeah.
and the people that have dark hair that are Irish, that are Black Irish, they say,
Mhm.
are simply genetically Irish.
Yeah.
They're basic, because here's the thing: black hair does not denote race.
It's dominant gene. Yeah.
Black eyes do not denote race. None of it denotes race. So they were just, but because of political,
Mm-hmm.
cultural, and the lackadaisical behavior of the Spanish when it comes to other groups that they would easily feel free to incorporate into their fold,
Ah.
was not acceptable to the northern country. That mixing was not acceptable.
You were not classically see now my grandmother on my mom's side, and my real grandfather on my mother's side, who died in the 1950s. I never met him. My mom's real dad. They were both Irish descendants from people who came here from Ireland, and uh, basically put the way they had always heard it growing up, according to my grandmother, was if you weren't blonde or redhead, you weren't real Irish. There was someone else in your ancestry. You were either blonde or you were a redhead and blue or green eyes.
Yeah,
That was
it's
Irish.
funny. It's funny,
Everything
but
else wasn't.
the original Irish people, the truly original Irish people,
Mm-hmm.
were actually, um, it's gonna sound a little bit, but the original Irish people, and there's plenty of papers from people that aren't Irish
Mm-hmm.
that simply were basically Southern European phenotype, Southern European, genetically
Mm-hmm.
looking.
Yeah.
They were Southern European. We're talking ancient. We're not talking about like,
Yes.
we're talking something ancient, but they were, and that's because populations mixed. But before they mixed, there was a group of people that were farmer type people living in Ireland. So
Well.
they were closer to what you would call Southern Europeans today, Sardinians today, even people from the Near East today, than they were from, let's say, Vikings didn't exist. There was no such thing as Vikings back then. I mean, that's a future
They,
event in that time. The original people were basically farming communities.
well, hunter gatherers.
Well, this was so the hunter gatherers were the original ones,
Mm-hmm.
and they were dark people. Like some people, it gets tricky because
Right, because
northern.
you had the Anatolians and you had the Slavs and everything else. But yeah, there's a lot of mixture that goes in there. I found and I was kind of holding back on this because this could be 2 hours on its own, and I don't want to hold people here that long. But I found a YouTube channel called History Time, and this guy does very, very well researched videos that are, I think they're broadcast quality documentaries. They are long. Most of them are very long. I watched one about Doggerland, which was prehistoric Europe from 500,000 to 4,000 BC. And that one was 50 minutes long. And then another one that was an hour long was ancient Europe and the last of the hunter gatherers from 10,000 to 4,000 BC. And it talks about that wave of migrant hunter gatherers that would come and go when Ireland was not a separate island from what is now Great Britain. That was not a island. It was a peninsula that was connected to France and the Netherlands. It was a forest peninsula, and it goes from 400,000 BC, excuse me, 500,000 BC, and the different waves of peoples that came and went and mixed and stayed and left and came and went, and how the hunter gatherer made way for the agrarian who planted crops, and then the sinking of Doggerland with down into and creating the English Channel, which separated them and made them what they are today, and rising sea levels and everything that separated Ireland from mainland Great Britain after the last ice ages. And it was a fascinating set of discoveries.
Mm-hmm.
The channel is called History Time. I'll go ahead and put a link to it in the chat. And if you want, I'll put a link over on our Facebook page. But it's a fascinating channel. Very well researched, cited. He more than happy to share his research, and it's a good, well produced channel. I think they're broadcast quality documentaries, and well worth your time if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course.
So
Just long story short, so the thing is that there's no room for I mean, if you look into the thing, it's incredible. I had no idea of these things, but if you consider the Vikings and you think to yourself, well, I'm not associated with the Vikings at all. Well, no, that's not true at all.
Yeah.
Today in 2023, Eloy, sitting here, no, I am associated with the Vikings. It's funny.
Well, we all are to one extent or another.
It's funny because we have understanding of what we grew up with, but then there's all this scientific stuff coming out apart from the archaeological stuff coming out. And so, even though I was saying, well, the Vikings, sure, they had a settlement up there and this and that, but it's Columbus. I'm closer to Columbus than I would be to the Vikings, let's say, but I'm not disconnected from the Vikings because all those people, due to wars and back and forth, like Mark was saying, interchanged their genetic qualities. And so to one degree or the other, we're all sharing these things in different proportions. But to be fair, I'm just throwing out the fact that, the Columbus thing is, although it would be convenient for me to say so, since I'm more connected to the history of that than I would be to the Vikings necessarily.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to be biased. I'm trying to be fair. It's not. It would. The impact was greater for the Columbus situation, but he was Italian as far as they know. So
yeah,
he wasn't Spanish.
Nope.
So,
and he went to the Portuguese first, and they were like, "Nah, we got this. We got everything. We're good. Yeah, we got it. We got it."
It wasn't worth it for them at the time due to what they thought that was possible.
Because they controlled the spice trade. They didn't need to find another way to get to India. They already had it covered. But Spain didn't have that. So he shopped the idea to Spain several times. And they didn't go for it at first either. They thought he was smoking crack or something. They didn't go for it at first either. It took a while to get them to fund him.
I don't know. I don't know how long it took them to fund it because they conquered Granada in 1492, and in 1492, Columbus was funded. So I don't know
what
the story
but is. That's why I say the Spanish had bigger fish to fry, and that was the Finnish driving the Moors out, and then more or less assembling Spain to a cohesive unit. And, you know, he was like, well, come on, please, please, please. I'm your buddy, ain't I, Spike? Please, please. And finally they were like, WTF. All right, here, go.
I don't
You
know.
know,
I don't know the back and forth of that.
if
Was that
anything,
how it was?
if anything, he'll shut up, you know?
Is that how it was?
Well, more or less. I
I
mean,
didn't read that specifically.
I mean,
That
more or
part.
less. I mean, they weren't on board with it the first time it was presented. The first couple of times it was presented, they were like, "Look, we're trying to, we're busy over here. You know, go talk to somebody else for a while."
A lot of the people that once they conquered the people that were Muslim and Jewish, they had to convert to Catholicism,
Catholicism, yeah,
and if they didn't do so, they had to leave.
yeah,
And a lot of them did leave, but many did convert. But in short order, that wasn't good enough.
yeah.
And so they started to kick out people that had stayed. So they did a flush of the blood, and the idea of purity of blood didn't come from, how they
Yeah.
talk about in our current times, at least within the last 100 years or whatnot, early 1900s, purity of blood in terms of the one drop rule and this and that. All of that started first with the Spanish were the ones that invented all that. They were
Yeah.
the ones that came up with the idea. The concept was, but that idea was also used against the Spanish.
Hmm.
It was used against the Spanish
Hmm.
because the accusation towards the Spanish was that they were ready to mix with the Moors and the Jews and the Africans. And in reality, the Spanish truly were. They didn't, even though they had things like slavery and whatnot, you could marry, and a slave could buy their way out or marry their way. It wasn't the same as, like, let's say, perpetual slavery.
Hmm.
It doesn't sound good either way, but they would mix. It was okay to do so.
Yep.
Unheard of in
In other cultures,
in
yeah.
the northern, and that was transposed to the United States.
Hmm.
And that's why in the United States you have the history that you have, because it was inherited from the British.
But it was the same in the Middle East as well. Once a slave, always a slave. You had no rights. You were property. It was the same way in the Middle East, and the
Yeah,
Arab slave trade was bigger than the North American.
but you're going east, and I'm talking about
I know that.
the Western. This is kind of the
But,
same thing as
but what I'm
Columbus
but what
and
I'm
and,
no,
and
but what
I,
I'm saying is it wasn't exclusive to Spain and it wasn't exclusive to Britain. I'm saying that there were other, in Spain you could work your way, or there was a way to get out of slavery.
Yeah.
In the Spanish Empire. There was not in the British Empire, and there were not in any of the Middle Eastern empires. I'm just trying to say that nobody had exclusivity on that part. But Spain was unique in that there was a way out.
no, it wasn't. It was so the the reason that they were biased against the Arabs and the Jews and whatnot is due to, well, they had overtaken their peninsula, but at the same time they had hundreds of years of alliance with people that crossed with each other and this and that. But since they wanted to clean the slates, the not the one drop rule, but the purity of blood was initiated, so that you have to show that you have purity of blood down your lines. If not, you can't have a title, you can't have this and that. That started with Spain, not with any of the northern countries.
No. You're right about that. Yes.
But the idea that people could marry outside their, like, thing, it was allowed. You can inherit, so it was different in that respect. But what I'm saying is that was unacceptable for the British,
Mhm.
at least the status quo that wanted the
Right.
political thing, that was unacceptable. And so it was kind of enforced. It was kind of like, legally you couldn't necessarily do certain things that you could
Right.
do. And so that was used against the Spanish, saying, well, look at these people, whoring around with this. And they did all that propaganda, and it was part of the trying to take over, which they succeeded. The British
Eventually,
succeeded,
yes.
due to all these pressures and stuff, and
It took a
and
few hundred years, but they did it. Yeah.
yeah, they did it. But it's a big difference. in the little knickknacks
But
of history that I did not know earlier until I started studying it.
well, yeah, and that's what I mean. You have to study this stuff to find out this stuff because when you're not taught it, when you're taught A plus B equals C, that's all you know. You have no reason to question it. But when you
Yeah,
start digging in a little bit deeper, you find there's an A.5 and a B.75. Well, we're now at C.25. How did we do that? You know? So,
it
I
was a
mean,
lot of different people
sure.
that encompassed the different empires,
And a
and
lot of rabbit holes to fall down, too.
yeah, there was a lot of different people involved with the British and the Spanish, and they cross involved each
Mhm.
other. So there were people that were Irish people that were not many, most of them actually, that were not accepted and were treated poorly by the English. And where did they go? They went into the Spanish territories. They went under the Spanish crown. And what did they do? They accepted them and they gave them positions. They opened up schools, military schools. They became navigators. They became what you call governors.
Mhm.
The Irish people came into the Spanish world and basically became, not treated bad. They became actual, like, um, the second or third, one of the two governors of Louisiana was an Irishman, O'Reilly, and he
Mhm.
happened to you know, be from that scenario where he couldn't work with the English because he was Irish, and the Irish were you
Yeah.
know Catholics, and the Irish were not necessarily of their same
Yeah.
bloodline, and they were not. So there was a lot of
Irish need not apply.
right, and so, but that didn't happen to all Irish people, but it happened to so many
Oh, yeah.
that they
And it
so
became a thing. Yeah. All right. We need to go ahead and land the plane. We've been almost 2 hours, man. I know it's a lot of fun, but I'm
well,
getting tired. I'm getting old.
all right, all right. So long story short, Greg,
Yeah.
that's how that's the story, but it's more complicated than that, and we're all just as the end note, but we're all inheritors of that stuff, so there's no good guys and bad guys. It's just a long history of you know the story that we all came from,
And now,
respectively.
and now you know the rest of the story. Paul
walter
Harvey.
Cronk Walter
Good day.
Cronkite.
Paul Harvey.
Oh, Paul, that's right.
Paul Harvey. Good day.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. All right, so we go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time on YouTube, Trampled Underfoot podcast on YouTube. We also have a Facebook page, Trampled Underfoot podcast on Facebook, where you could catch our posts concerning whatever we may talk about. Like Mark earlier on had a video explaining a little bit about Doggerland and the history thereof. So he might post that over there. But if you have show suggestions, feel free to leave a comment about that. And we also have a site, trampledunderfootpodcast.com, where you can catch our past episodes by pressing the Wayback Machine button and dropping those into your podcatcher and listening to it audio wise. We're also sponsored by
Harneo Media. Look, there is absolutely no better way to establish or increase your web presence, give your fledgling business legitimacy, and drive traffic to your products or service than having your own website with a custom URL set up the way you want it. And probably the easiest way I know of is to get a hold of Steve Nealon or Shay Morehouse over at harneomedia.com. They can design your website, they can run and maintain your website, very reasonable prices, and service like you will not believe. I was working with Steve on my website a little bit earlier, and I can tell you he is the man, the myth, the legend. When you work with Harneo Media, you're working with Steve's, and that's it. You're working with Steve. You're not talking to some nameless, faceless person in some call center somewhere that you will never, ever have the chance to correspond with. You're working with Steve. The service is personal and it means a lot. So check them out at harnealmedia.com. That's HARNEAL media.com. Sponsor of trampledunderfootpodcast.com.
All right. Well, we did it. We went into. I always feel when we talk about these things, because I am surrounded by people that might or might not identify through the long history of time with the English world, broadly speaking, or British world thereabouts. And I am coming from a Spanish oriented world. And there's lots of criticisms that sound pretty horrible in terms of this and that, and the balance and this and that. But I'm not necessarily. I love my friends, regardless of the atrocities that you've been laying across the world. No, I love my friends regardless of whatever the heck they may or may not be. I don't consider it like that. But so what I'm saying is that, I truly have love for you guys. I'm just talking history wise, just in case. But I don't think I need to say that because I think that you guys are quite up to snuff on what's going on. But I do feel a little bit like thinking, well, damn, I'm saying all this stuff. It sounds pretty freaking horrific, but it's all history. So I just just wanted to say that. Any final words before we boogie?
Bye.